1. In 2017, I had lost my job because of my drinking problem. My roommate at the time made a suggestion of moving to Arizona and trying to get a fresh start. His mother had moved out there after she had retired and remarried. However, her husband had died and she was down there alone. Since I was a kid, I always wanted to see Arizona. I had pulled out my 401k and paid up all my bills in Massachusetts before I decided to fly down and check it out. We stayed at his mother's for Christmas, and we made arrangements with an apartment complex to be able to move in after the first of the year. After we flew back to Massachusetts, we loaded up a U-Haul and towed my truck down with a car trailer. We made an agreement that 1, we were both going to get jobs and pay our halves of the rent and electric. 2, the apartment wasn't going to be a party house with a lot of people coming in and out. And 3, it wasn't going to be a flop house with people crashing because they have nowhere to go. Pretty reasonable rules if you ask me. He got a job at a Pizza Hut while I was still collecting unemployment from Massachusetts. I eventually found a job a couple months later and managed to quit drinking. I was beginning to feel much better being sober, but it also opened my eyes to what my roommate was really like. We had been friends for 15 years, and the alcohol was blinding me from his true colors. Rules 2 and 3 went right out the window with him, and the next thing I know, people who he only just met for a few hours or a day are in and out of the house, all times of the night. I would wake up to find some stranger sleeping on my couch. I started getting very frustrated with the situation. He then convinced 2 people he knew from New Hampshire to move down here and do the same thing we were. I had no knowledge of it until they called asking for a ride from the airport. They were there less than a month and got evicted because the boyfriend got caught sleeping with one of the neighbors when the girlfriend stabbed him with a fork. She got arrested and he flew back to New Hampshire. She got with another guy down there, and they were hanging out with my roommate every night. Complaints started pouring in to the property manager, and they told us if it keeps up, we were going to be evicted. I gave him an ultimatum, either no more visitors after 10, or he wouldn't be renewing the lease with me. He agreed, and things started to improve. A couple of times the following year he had changed jobs twice and had fallen behind on the electric bill. Both times his excuse was it was someone else's fault. He got fired. The bills weren't that bad, but I had to keep hounding him for the money to pay it. A couple of times he would borrow the money from his mother, or I would have to cover it. It was getting annoying. By the end of the year, he was spending his nights at a crazy girlfriend's. He was still paying his rent, but staying there. So I paid the electric myself because he was hardly there anymore. 2020 comes, and he decides, because his girlfriend wants to move out of the apartment they're in, he'll sign into another lease with her, even though he already had one with me. His mother, all his friends, the police, and I told him not to sign a lease with this woman. I'm not an expert, but if police officers are telling you not to get involved with someone, there's usually a good reason. But he does it anyway, and then COVID hits, and he lost his job because he worked in a restaurant. He paid rent at both places until April. From May until September, I'm still paying the rent, and he's telling me that he's been paying his share even though he wasn't there. We would see each other once in a while when he invited me over there, or they got in a fight, and he wanted to come back. No matter how many times they fought and he said he was done with her, he was right back over there a couple days later. I made it a point to tell him that I wasn't going to be picking his ass up anymore because the last time I went to pick him up, they almost got physical, and when I tried to intervene to keep him from going to jail, he turned around spitting in my face and yelled, "Fuck you!" to me. Such an insult turned my whole perspective about him at that point. Come September, I go to pay the rent, and the property manager mentions that we are $2,000 behind in payments. I ask her to pull up the ledger for me, and he has not made a payment since April. With the late fees and all the missed months, it just kept adding up. But the ledger showed that I was making my payments for half the rent every month. I got on the phone and told him he better get over here, we had to talk. When he got there, I flipped right out on him because I have already been homeless before, and I was not going to have that happen again. He told me that he was going to go down on the next Friday and throw them $500 for now. He never gave them the money, but he went down there and got a promissory note that he never even lived up to. Come October, no payments from him. He never even went to the office to talk to the people. I talked to the property managers and explained the entire situation, and they knew I was in good standing. But because both of us were on the lease, we were both going to be held responsible. One thing I started doing when I got down to Arizona was going back to church. I had become good friends with the bishop of the church there, and he's a retired army colonel who knows a lot of people in the town. He spoke to the property owner on my behalf and managed to get them to see that I wasn't the one who made this mess. At that point, I was already making arrangements to move out and live by myself. I ended up selling a lot of my stuff because I was moving into a studio apartment and didn't have room for everything I owned. Come November, the bishop's talk with the property manager worked for my favor. I had gone to pay the rent and explained that I would probably be moving before the end of the year. They completely understood and said that they were going to keep the debt owed on my roommate, and I was clear of anything regarding any debt to that apartment. He shows up at the house one day and he's mad, goes running into his room without saying a word to me. At that point, I really didn't care, but about an hour goes by after he gets off the phone, and he comes bawling his eyes out because he doesn't know what he's going to do. He's really sorry that he messed everything up, and he doesn't know how he's going to make it right because he owes so much money. Turns out, I wasn't the only one he wasn't paying. He wasn't paying for his girlfriend's place either. When I started getting on him about it, he just shook his head and yelled, "I don't want to hear it," and ran back to his room. Very pathetic for a 45-year-old man. By the end of December, I had moved out, paying my last month's rent. The property manager sent me a letter clearing me of all charges entailed with the apartment because he was still living there. With the rent being divided evenly, we were paying $363.50 each, plus about $65 each for the electric. Because I moved out and they wouldn't let him sign a new lease because he failed to pay the old one, he was on a payment plan for $827 per month for the apartment, $350 a month for the overdue amount, and the electric bill, which has to be prepaid, because he's never had an account with any electric company. So he went from $428.50 to $1,327 a month. And that's not including what he owed on the other lease. He ended up having to get 2 jobs working 7 days a week to be able to catch up with that bill. It's been 2 years and he's still trying to get me back into his life. Even asked me if I wanted to make $500 by being in an amateur porn video. No way would I put myself in that position. It's rather pathetic that every bridge he builds with somebody ends up getting burned because of his own stupidity and negligence. He also can never be at fault for anything that happens. It's always someone else's fault. Months after I had left, his mother had told me that he's going around saying everything is my fault, that his life is so messed up now. That's right. I made your life miserable because I decided not to let you take advantage of me anymore. Grow up. It is so much nicer not having that kind of person in my life anymore. The sad thing is, his mother looks at me as more of a son than him. I just find it amazing that even in his mid-40s, he still has that mentality of a high schooler. We went down there to change our ways and better ourselves. I was the only one that committed to do that, and I wasn't letting him drag me back down. Good riddance to bad rubbish. 2. This is the story of my dear old paternal grandfather. I don't speak to him anymore, for reasons you're about to see. To start it off, we have to go back to when my grandparents were first married. They married at 18 and had my dad at 19. I don't know all that much about their marriage. I just know it was a very toxic situation. Both went to school, and after my grandma went to work, while my grandpa took care of my dad. He hated it, from what I've been told. Every time grandma came home, my dad was still in his diaper. She tried to make it work for my dad's sake, but it didn't work, and they ended up divorcing when he turned 4. Despite not liking taking care of my dad that much, my grandpa was downright pissed when my grandma got full custody. Eventually, my grandma reconnected with her high school sweetheart, and they got married. My step-grandpa is one of the best people in the world. He treated my dad like his own kid. My grandpa absolutely did not like this. Despite being remarried as well, he insisted that step-grandpa would never replace him. My dad was continually caught in the crossfire and often felt guilty for being close to his stepdad. Despite the kind of person my grandpa was, my dad was still a kid and wanted his father's love and approval. Even though my grandma had full custody, she wanted my dad and grandpa to have a relationship. So my dad ended up spending every summer vacation in Arizona, all the way across the country. My dad ended up hating these visits. He had no friends in Arizona. His stepmother was very cold towards him and openly favored his half-sister. And my grandpa was constantly harassing him about pretty much everything. The worst instance he can recall is when he forgot to bring his transcript one year. My grandpa was obsessed with having a prodigy child, and my dad admits he was nowhere near that. It ended with my grandpa chewing him out, saying he needed to do better and destroying my father's self-esteem. Things didn't get better when my dad went to college. Grandpa still had a lot of influence over him, and my dad ended up going to a school he chose in California. He studied architecture, but after realizing it was too much, he listened to his stepdad and changed to media production. Once again, my grandpa was upset, saying my step-grandpa had no right to influence my dad's choices. Ironic, huh? My dad obviously ignored his father and graduated with a degree in a field he ended up loving. My dad decided to move to Florida after graduation and lived with some of his close friends. It was here that he ended up meeting my mom. After a few months of dating, she meets his family. My grandma and step-grandpa loved her, but my grandpa didn't. My dad tried to shield her from it, and they managed to be civil. But that went out the window when my parents got married. My grandpa tried to talk my dad out of it, saying my mom was too controlling. She wasn't. All my mom did was help my dad finally gather the courage to stand up to my grandpa. To this day, my mom has no idea about that encounter. Grandpa kept a face for the ceremony, but my dad knew he wasn't pleased. Things appeared to improve somewhat when I was born. I was the first grandchild, and my family was all over me. Despite not being on the best terms with my parents, according to them, he absolutely adored me, as did my step-grandma. My dad didn't like his father being around so much, but he wasn't going to prevent a relationship between us. The same thing happened when my brother was born a few years later. He spoiled us whenever he could, as did my other grandparents. Things got bad again when I started to get older. My grandma and step-grandpa only lived an hour away, and I was much closer to them as a result. I had no idea step-grandpa wasn't related to me the way he treated me, and I thought it was the coolest thing that I had 6 grandparents. My grandpa was not happy with how close I was to them, despite him still living several states away. He and my dad ended up getting into yet another fight because of this. It was at this point that my dad gave up. No matter what he did, it would never be good enough for my grandpa. He told my grandpa that he was done maintaining such a toxic relationship. However, my grandpa was free to continue his relationship with me and my brother. We were 5 and 1 at the time. Initially, my grandpa agreed, and would send us presents for holidays and call every few months. But one day he just stopped. He admitted that he hoped doing this would get my dad to talk to him again. When it didn't, he cut all communication, telling my dad it was his fault his children wouldn't know their grandfather. He even threatened to remove us from his will, hoping my dad would concede, but he never did. So my grandpa just vanished. My brother was only 3 and never noticed. I did. I was heartbroken, as I thought he no longer loved me. It wasn't until I was 13 that I found out what happened, and my hurt became anger. It's been over a decade since I last heard from him. It's funny, but he ended up getting the exact opposite of what he was hoping to achieve. My dad doesn't talk to him. I honestly resent him. And my brother doesn't even know who he is. I turned 18 recently, and both me and my dad are wondering if he's going to try and contact me. If he does, he'll be in for a rude surprise. 3. A little backstory. My grandfather is a terrible person, a complete narcissist, and an entitled prick. To put it into perspective, the first time he met my grandmother, she was on a date with another man. E.G. barreled in, basically kicked the man out, and continued on as if he was the one she was there to see. I've heard a number of horror stories about how he would beat my grandmother, mother, and uncle. He would cut people out of his life for the pettiest reason, including his own children, and is all around a terrible person. So on to the story. My sister got married a couple years ago, pre-COVID. The ceremony was at her and my mother's church, started at 4 and lasted an hour. The reception was held at a hotel on the other side of town, so my sister decided to have it start at 6. Everyone made it to the reception just fine, and things were going well. My sister and her husband show up right on time and start going table to table speaking with guests as is customary. This is when E.G. started acting up. My family was seated right in front of the wedding party, which I was on. I hear my grandfather start talking and tuned in on the conversation.
Dinner was supposed to be served at 6. It's now 6:15.
Side note, it was never stated anywhere that dinner was at 6, just that the reception started at that time. My mom says, bride and groom are still talking to their guests. Once they are done, food will be served.
I don't give a shit. I was told dinner was at 6, so where's my fucking food?
My aunt says, can't you wait for 5 more minutes? Bride and groom only have a couple more tables to go, then we can eat. My mom adds, and you can keep your voice down. This is the bride's big day, and we don't need you making a scene. Grandpa apparently does not appreciate that last comment and says,
don't you tell me what to do. You may be a grown woman, but I will not hesitate to beat your ass.
At this point, I can see this is going downhill fast and start to get up to see if I can help somehow. Before I get a chance, I hear my aunt speak up. If you're gonna be an asshole, then just leave. We don't need your attitude today.
Well, fine then.
Yelling so loud I saw people on the other end of the rather large dining hall turn to look. Somehow my sister nor her husband seemed to notice. E.G. stands up and starts marching towards the exit. Mom reminds my aunt that E.G. is supposed to do the father-daughter dance with the bride. Our dad passed away months before this, and the bride had her heart set on having some male figure in the family do the dance. Mom and aunt follow E.G. out of the dining hall and into the main foyer of the venue. I, thinking on my feet, immediately close all the doors into the foyer, so no one inside could see what happened next. As I'm closing the final door, I hear Mom and my aunt trying to talk E.G. into staying. He doesn't say a word, and right as I turn around to try to help the situation, he balls up his fist and punches my aunt right in the face. He does this right in front of the security guard. Without another word, he turns around and leaves, leaving his wife at the table, and my aunt leaning against the wall, rubbing her cheek. The security guard calls the company he works for and asks them to send an officer to his location. My mom says, please no cops. I can't let him ruin the bride's big day. I should note here, the security guard was not hired by us, but instead by the venue. Venue policy is that if a security guard sees any signs of illegal activity, including assault, he has to call the police. The police showed up, and my aunt decides not to press charges, but the police insist they still talk to my grandpa and explain the severity of the situation. While my mom and aunt worked this out, I ran inside to explain to the bride that grandpa left and offered to do the father-daughter dance in his stead. After the reception, we gave the bride the entire story, and she was furious but was thankful that nobody saw any of this happen. It took over a year in the birth of the bride's first child to start talking to E.G. again, and it took Mom, my aunt, and I even longer. For anyone wondering why he was even invited to the wedding, he had stopped being physically abusive after his first 2 kids moved out. He was still an asshole, and could hold a grudge like no other, but most of his entitled and abusive behavior had diminished for a couple decades by that point. This was the first big problem he had caused. Just wanted to let everyone know the situation a little better. 4. This is so ridiculous and beyond stupid I had to share it. After work yesterday, I drove to the grocery store for a couple things on my way home. This took maybe 10 minutes, since I got all I needed and left. I walk back to my car, where I see this woman, I hereby deem crazy lady, probably early 40s with a teenaged girl, I hereby deem not so crazy kid, eyeballing my car at all angles. I go up to them and ask what they're doing. The woman said she was admiring the pretty black van. I had told her it's a Nissan Kicks, and that it's an SUV, not a van. And a really good one at that. She looked me up and down, you know the one, and asked how a child like me would know. "It's not like you own it," she said. I told her it is mine. She didn't believe me, saying there's no way someone like you could afford a car this nice. I held up the remote I'd been carrying since I left the store and clicked the lock button. It was already locked, to prove my point. Told her to move away from my car so I could leave. I don't know if she was on something, but she just wouldn't let it go. Kept saying crap like a girl like me can't possibly own the car, and I was probably borrowing it. I said I really don't care what she thinks and proceeded to put my bags in the passenger seat. Not so crazy kid who said she was 14 was much nicer when she asked me about my car. I filled her in on the mileage, smooth handling, the dealership I got it from, and how much I pay per month on it, plus the insurance, she asked. She said she wanted a car like this when she got her license, but wasn't old enough to work yet. I told her to save her money and do her homework when it came to car shopping, so she gets exactly what she likes. Told her this was my first car too, bought it brand new. She smiled and congratulated me. The whole time I stood where my legs blocked my license plate in case crazy lady got ideas. She went into her purse while Tina and I talked. She was actually quite sweet, and pulled out her checkbook. Haven't seen one of those in a while. A crazy lady then asked me how much for the car so she could get it for her daughter. I laughed until I realized she was serious and told her my car wasn't for sale. She kept insisting, since it was, in my own words, brand new and easy to drive, she'd get it now and save her daughter trouble and money later. I told her, your daughter isn't old enough to have a license yet. Also, you just said it wasn't mine, so why would I sell you a car that didn't belong to me? She backpedaled after hearing me talk about it, but the daughter told her mom to back off and thanked me for talking to her. I wished the girl luck, got into my car and drove home. That was a weird encounter. What kind of idiot thinks it's okay to discriminate against a stranger with a nice car just by my looks? One of my co-workers is barely 4'6" and drives a huge red truck that dwarfs my car. I'd never assume she doesn't own the truck since, well, I have no reason to. Crazy lady, mind your business. You'll live longer and have fewer enemies wishing you get the business end of karma. 5. I work for an international airport. Won't say which one, but will say a busy one, where I've heard it all. It's a high-stress environment for both staff and passengers, so you always get someone flying off the handle at one point, which can sometimes be for a reasonable and sympathetic reason too. Sometimes for very stupid reasons that are either entirely their fault or just silly altogether. This means handling Karens and entitled people in general is something I've become pretty good at. But this one request bemused me completely. It's the middle of the afternoon and we're experiencing a lull in activity before another big rush of flights. I'm approached by a passenger and her silent husband who doesn't say a word in this entire exchange. "Excuse me, I'm late." At first I think she's going into the line, but she's talking straight to me. I'm ready to see if I can bump her into the priority part of the security line. The usual standard treatment to passengers who are late. Sometimes things happen, traffic, a lost bag, lost in the airport, etc. I don't even get a word in before she sticks her finger up to stop me. You know that one? Where they whip the finger to hush you, and you instantly see red? That one. "I want to see if I can change the time." "Of your flight?" "No, a different time." "If you want to go on a later flight, I can..." Again, the finger of silence. "I want to change the time so I can make it for this flight." This already ranking amongst the most entitled individuals I've had the displeasure of talking to. But customer service face on. I gut it out. "I'm sorry, the best I could do is check for delays to see if it gives you extra time to get to the gate, but I can't change the flight time." "You're an airport, though. You can just change the time." "The flights go at a certain time, so they can all get off the runway in a certain order. Any changes can mean delays." I'm not sure if that's even accurate, but a white lie to explain why I can't change her flight time seemed like the way to get her off my back. But... Then delay all the others then. Change the time. I don't have any power to control flight times, especially for single passengers. No. Don't delay mine. Just change the time so we can get on with our day. My mind went cross-eyed for a second. Delay first, then don't delay? I was trying to make sense of it all. I cannot change the flight time, I'm sorry. The finger. Again. You are not hearing me. Change the time. This time she spread her arms out patronizingly, as if I was struggling to put two and two together. I cannot change the time of any flights. If I could, I would, but I can't. No! Just change the time! At this point, I've lost the plot completely. I simply just asked her for her boarding card, hoping she wasn't late enough to catch the flight. She was by 2 hours and 14 minutes. Forget the gate. The plane was halfway to its destination by now. I'm sorry, but you've missed your flight. I know that. That's what I was trying to say. If you change the time, we can get a new one for the same time, and then we'll be on time. Once more explaining this, like I'm struggling to put the round block in the circle-shaped hole. I can't make a new flight happen. If you go to your airline desk, they can book you on a later flight either tonight or tomorrow, but I can't just the finger, this time with venom. All we want is for you to change the time. I don't see why you can't do this simple thing. It'll mean other people who are late can get on board brand new flights too. This should be a good thing for you. I saw the husband. He had distanced himself a few yards away, fiddling with the hand sanitizers, as if trying to ignore what was going on. And it was at this point it clicked in my head. You want me to change the time? Like go back an hour? Finally, he gets it. She looked to her husband, who wasn't wanting any of this. Yes, change the time. It shouldn't be hard to do. To that one. She pointed at the destination on the boarding card I was still holding. I could physically feel my brain leave my body in a pink sludge. I had no response for an awkwardly long time. I'm Dr. Strange, apparently. But I had not come to bargain. I can't do that. I can't change the time zones. Why not? On the itinerary, it shows me the time zone difference. So why not follow it for a change? You're an international airport. That means you fly everywhere. You can't just adopt a time zone. What if people have jet lag from other countries? No. All flights go in our time zone, no exceptions. Just turn the clocks back. It's that easy. Look. And then she fiddled very awkwardly with her phone for a good half a minute before showing me the time zone of a place she wasn't even going to. See? At this point, the husband makes the rescue, coming up to her and gesturing her to go, again without words. She called me fucking useless, and stormed off, and I stood there as if I had just undergone an out-of-body experience. I was certain there was no language barrier because the passport was given to me with the boarding card in it, and we were from the same country. I wanted to say she was drunk, but she spoke very plainly and without slurring her words. Even right now, I can't believe it really happened. I've been working here for a decade at least, so it ranks amongst the weirdest I've encountered. A woman who wanted me to literally change time itself, so she could make a flight she missed by 2 hours. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 55. You know that thing when you need to laugh, there's not really any reason for it, but you just know you shouldn't, and so you do. Screw it, I've done several takes of this already. This is the best one, here we go. Idiots in the Wild, episode 55. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do share it with all your friends and family, and possibly your pets also, if they have their own devices. And sometimes cats like to go and they kind of paw the devices. If you've got one that does that, share it with them too. Right, let's see. We did that. Oh, comments. Yes. A little bit of a selfish question this week. Not as exciting as some of the others. Maybe we'll have two. We'll see. First question is, have you bought Hellfreezer merchandise? If so, what did you buy? And if you haven't, but are interested, is there anything I don't have available? Bear in mind, sizing options are out of my control. If you need something smaller or larger, there's not a lot I can do about it. Sorry for banging the microphone there, but we've established no retakes, having done several already. But I can control designs and what items they go on. I mean, I've got mugs, I've got hoodies. This isn't one of them. This was a gift. T-shirts and that sort of thing. So let me know. Right. Now a more fun question. Would you like me... You know what? I'm not even going to ask that, because I should probably finish doing Dracula and the Jack and Andy stories before I consider doing any more fiction. So that leaves that there. So we'll see about getting more Dracula done at some point. I really do need to pick up the pace with that before I become one of the undead myself. No, I'm not a vampire. No, not a vampire. No, because vampires don't show up on film, you see. That's how you tell. Although I do have to avoid the daylight. Nothing was said about avoiding pointy sticks, but I think that's good advice in any case. Where was I? Oh yeah, anyway, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.